Yes, Mr. McCloskey, your next target is General Pandurovic.
Thank you, Mr. President. You can see the crew is getting ready to come in, but if we could get a 5 or 10 minute break after my remarks, to get settled in.
Yes, of course.
That was the plan.
And you have approximately, from what I'm told, about an hour left.
Thank you. All right. General Pandurovic. As I've said, you've seen the prosecution in the Pandurovic case battle this out. I think the issues are clear, the documents are clear, the history is clear. I'll go over just a few of the points to help remind you of the prosecution's case, respond to some of what the defense has said. Briefly, the events of 1993, Operation Proboy, the conduct of the war from Directive 4. We were surprised to hear in the opening statements that General Pandurovic was going to be suggesting he was the hero of Kamenitsa. We still see that in the brief. But as you're aware, Directive 4 particularly says to get rid of the Muslim population, and perhaps a document that is second to none in terms of its level of authority was the order from General Zhivanovic implementing Directive 4 in even more vicious language to move out the populations of those areas. And Vinko Pandurovic was had a key role in that. When we heard that he was the hero of Kamenitsa, we dug into the Drinacor collections to prepare for cross-examination, and the deeper we dug, the more material we found. And you'll remember his reports talking about attacking civilians and burning villages and cleaning up after mosques, reports that in his particular bold style got edited when they went up from the Drinacor, cutting out that language. To suggest he's the hero of Kamenitsa, in my view, is appalling. The UN report, shells were dropping in on the civilians in the Konjevic-Polje area. They're trying to get a hold of Pandurovic to stop that. It finally stops. That part of the history of the war is awful. He played a major role in it. That was abundantly clear. The attack on the enclave, he clearly played a major role. He was aware of the Drinacor version of Directive 7 with the awful language in it. He was aware of the history. His group played a significant and substantial role in the takedown of the enclave. 12 July meeting. The 12 July meeting in Bratunac, which he insists is on 11 July. Frankly, I'm surprised that he insisted on that. I'm surprised that he continues to insist in that. In fact, in a document that we recently agreed would go into evidence, it was a statement of General Andrich saying he went to the meeting on the 11th, why the defense wanted it in. But I'm asking him in that, well, what was said at the meeting? It was on Djepa. And I said, well, what happened on the 12th? Well, is that when Mladic came and gave you the speech? Yes, it is, on Djepa. Well, no one is contesting the fact that the Mladic gave the speech at Viagor on the 13th. So Andrich had it wrong by one day. I had assumed in the beginning of this case that that mistake would be acknowledged, and even though it put them all in Bratunac on 12 July, the day the plan was first implemented in Potocari, thought they would be able to suck that up, but their arrogance, unmitigated arrogance, The evidence and the intercepts, Yevdovich, Bayagic, and a stupid fish, they stuck to that story, these three people, all the way through today to the brief. I know when you review the evidence that you know that that meeting happened on the 12th. The Intercept capped it. Why do they insist so much on that? I ask myself. It's because they're with Mladic. Dark things were spoken of. Why else would they go into that unholy trio of Yevdovich, Bayagic, Pandurovic? 13 July moves toward Jepa. 14 July is with the command. Would have been able to communicate with General Kirstich, who's fully engaged in the murder operation. The 15th July, I won't go into in detail. I've already done that with the morning of General Kirstich. He remembered Pandorovich's words to me about that. He, of course, had to know. He had to have been told what was facing his brigade when he went home. The amounts of resources involved in that, required of it. If he was going to have any chance of defending his column from the Muslim from the rear, the Second Corps from the other side, the fact that there was a major murder operation in play at the time that Dragan Obrenović has pled guilty for authorizing and being involved in, had to have been mentioned. You must find that as part of your judgment. There is no other reasonable conclusion. Vinko Pandorović, by the morning of 15 July, is fully informed. And he goes back to his brigade. He meets Obrenović. Of course Obrenović tells him what's going on. He tells you no. He learns it from some guy named Branko Gujic later on down the road. That is so patently absurd, it beggars belief. How does Eileen Galice get in her statement that he told Pandorović about, that Obrenović told Pandorović about it? She couldn't have made that up. She hardly knew the case. From all the circumstances, from the evidence, from his testimony and demeanor, again, of course he was told about it. That yarn he spun was no more believable than pigs can fly. We'll talk about pigs a little later on. The 15 July Interim Daily Combat Report. You've heard me talk about it in detail in the opening statement. You saw us go over it in detail in the cross-examination. I don't intend to do that again. The report was written clearly. It meant what it said. Its cryptic reference has obvious meaning. The only other time I know Pandorović to get that cryptic is when on his 18th July report he made reference to all the killings and how that had upset Zvornik and angered him. It's the same kind of thing. But in that 15 July report, he is taking responsibility. The additional burden for us he is taking responsibility when he says that. He's asking for more troops. He's asking for people to come guard these people, come kill these people, and come bury them. He leaves out kill because that's too unseemly. But that's what he's asking for. He gets some help. But his units participate. And the brief on that is rather incomplete. Incredibly incomplete. Look at our brief when you want to see the men, the materials, the units that are involved in this, from the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th. And this defense that the Zvornik Brigade would have had to mobilize the schools in some official way, and therefore they're done by the civil. It's just absolutely absurd. Drago Nikolic and the MPs, of course, grabbed that school at Orahovac for the military purpose. It's under the authority of Dragan Obrenović. When Vinko comes back in, it's under his authority. And they do that with all the schools. The fact that there's a civilian bulldozer driver that gets incorporated into the military operation, those arguments are so lacking in foundation, I am again surprised they were even made. The argument that Beara came in and became commander. Again, I've spoken about that. You've heard the experts on that. At one point in their brief, they agree with Butler that a senior officer can come in and, of course, issue orders, and people will follow them, but the first thing they'll do is tell their commander. But he cannot come in and take over command unless he's specifically designated to do so. Nobody's coming into Vinko Pandorovic's area of responsibility and taking over command. He would never allow that. That argument cannot fly. For this case and for history, that argument has to be put in the dustbin. Can I go into private session briefly?
Let's go into private session for a short while, please. We are in open session.
The 15th July report and Vinko Pandorovic's testimony provide there is a unique window into the real meaning of that report. And it has to do with Eileen Galice's report and the pigs. Now, Eileen Galice got some things wrong, but she got a lot right. And what she wrote was, Pandorovich advised that Rick Butler refers to a handwritten report dated the 15th of July, 1992 at 2000 hours. That report refers to a pig farm near the 4th Battalion. The soldiers of the Muslim 28th Division seized the command post and killed pigs. Pandorovich acknowledges they had Butler's report. He now acknowledges that that had to do with Asanatia. Though, remember how this all started. Huge attack on Eileen Galice. Huge attack on Asanatia. Asanatia meant going out and looking for wounded or casualties first, and then secondly, corpses and burial. But what he was explaining to Eileen Galice was the term Asanatia in the 15 July report was a reference to when the 4th Battalion got overrun on the 15th and pigs were killed and had to be buried. That's what it says in the report. The problem with that is the 4th Battalion got overrun on the 16th. And it got over, or late night the 15th, after this report was written. That's the first problem. The second problem is there's no way on God's green earth a brigade commander in the midst and facing what Venko Pandurović was facing would report the burial of some 20 or 30, or whatever it was, pigs to the Drina Corps command. Now, Venko Pandurović tried to sell that yarn to Eileen Galice. She wrote it down. And in the direct testimony, something that was extremely well prepared and very well organized, and there was no more important topic in this trial than the 15 July daily combat or interim combat report. Look what Pandurović said about that. He acknowledged, talking to Eileen Galice about Asanatsia, but he, noting, I'm sure, that she'd mentioned 1992 in her report, said that he was talking about an incident in 1992 in another area, 1992, 1993, I believe. And that was the direct testimony. No mention of the seizing of the command post, as noted, and the 4th Battalion and the Muslim 28th Division, all so noted by Eileen Galice. Completely left that out of his direct testimony. Had to have been on purpose. He does not want to get near that crazy story. So, on cross-examination, General, what about the 4th Battalion? Go back and look at what he said. He tells me, oh yes, it did happen. And he throws in, oh, there was an artillery barrage beforehand, trying to account for the fact that the pigs died before the post was seized. And he ends up by saying, oh, he told Eileen Galice both. Remember when I said, General, you've got to pick your pigs? He said, he told her about the pigs in 93, and he told her about the pigs in 95. And if he told her about the pigs in 95, just like she said, so he's explaining Asanatsia with the pig story. It's absolutely absurd. It's the dead giveaway. When you're caught up in a trap like this, it's hard to keep your lies straight, no matter how well organized and how good you are. And the attempt to cover everyone with some artillery is what got him in trouble. He went way too far with that with Eileen Galice. He got in more trouble on direct examination, and on cross-examination he finished himself. He did that throughout on most topics.
Mr. McCloskey, can you be specific as to the transcript pages, reference? Look at line 8. So on cross-examination, General, what about the 4th Battalion? All I'm asking is for the reference.
Venko Pandurović's testimony in direct examination that I referred to was 31286 to 31288. Pandurović cross-examination about the 4th Battalion pig farm was at 32237 through 32240, and this is explained in the brief, Your Honors.
Thank you.
That report means what it says. Asanatsia means what it's always meant in this trial, the burial of the Muslims. Obligations of security meant guarding them. no question about that. And this document indicates Vinko Pondorovich took this burden on, as was his orders. Now, the 16th July, the hero of Balkovice argued over how many of his men were killed. Depends on who you listen to. One of the colonels that went out and reported back to the main staff provided one number. Other reports provide others. It was a lot of men. If you add in the men that died in Srebrenica that are going to be adding on his mind, and the 14th and the 15th, he loses 20, 30, 40 men in Balkovice. He stops it. That's why he stops it. That's clear in the evidence. He stopped it to save Serb lives. There's a suggestion that he did it to save Muslim lives. So there's no indication in this record that Vinko Pondorovich gave a hoot about Muslim lives. It was his job to kill the Muslim army. They'd been killing him and his men. There's no indication he cared about those Muslims. He opened that column to save his own men. That's why he didn't get in so much trouble afterward. The colonels went back and reported he was in a tough spot. That's why he did it. This idea that he did it as some sort of humanitarian gesture is just as absurd as being the hero of Kamenitsa. You got that feeling when he was testifying, when he talked about the Muslims and they were preventing any Serb life at a certain side of a river. There was no love lost there. Look at his morale reports, how he dehumanized the Muslims. No, he does not care at that point about Muslim lives. He's trying to save Serb lives. The suggestion that he's the hero of Balkovice is appalling. His 18 July report, where he indicates, whose idea was it to bring 3,000 military-aged Turks, created unrest in Zvornik, problems for him. That showed he was angry and not happy that the Muslims were forced upon him and his town and the people. There's not one indication that it was the killing of them that was the problem. It was that he and his guys had to do it. He's complaining about the burden on him and Zvornik for having to do it, not that it had to be done. Did you get any remorse out of his testimony at all? I didn't see any. And there's not a shred of concern or worry or thought for the Muslims in any of his reports. Certainly not those two, the 16th, the 18th, or the 15th. The report sent like that to his command to General Krstić would have been treasonous. Nobody's helping the Muslims. And that cannot be any more clear than what happened to the Muslims after all this. The Milici patients linked directly to him through intercepts, and the fact he's commander and they're in his unit, severely wounded folks. Yes, they would have seen the Muslims that were gathered in Novokosava, the large amount of Muslims that had since disappeared. So the main staff, the Drina Corps, must have made the decision, we must kill these severely wounded people that are being held by the Drina Corps. So they send Popović to go do it. He could have stopped that. He could have sent those people to Batković on his own, that he'd done many times before, I'm sure. He'd let them die. He let those 4 Muslim survivors of Branjevo Farm disappear the same way. He used them as witnesses against their own guys who gave them sandwiches and told them where the front line was going to go. He could have stopped that. He knew all about that. Who's responsible? Who did this in the brigade? 3 guys? Beara, Popović, Nikolić? No. No. This took the unified effort of a brigade, outside units, the command structure, the security branch, the MPs. Pandorovic's brief, as I said, is wholly lacking in this. Vinko Pandorovich pointing down the line. It's awful. He has a hard time doing it when it comes to Obrenović. Remember the absurd suggestion that, something about Obrenović pled guilty even though he wasn't guilty? That was his explanation for that. Absolutely crazy. Rather comes up with that kind of nonsense for you than put it all on Obrenović. Commander at the time of the 4th Battalion, Lazar Ristic, was up to his eyeballs in this, was at Orahovac. The commanders of the Petkovci Battalion, Marko Milosevic, Stoja Stanisic, visits from Drago and Beara, and had all those prisoners in their schools. There's much more to that story and their involvement. The Rocevic Battalion, Sreko Achimovic, up to his eyeballs in this when Vinko Pandorovich is back. His unit, his men, involving in the executions, the transport, himself. There's no more important person for Vinko Pandorovich than the commanders of his battalions. These are the guys that command the guys in the trenches. The guys in the trenches don't perform. Zvornik is lost. Sreko Achimovic is a key guy. Anything that Vinko Pandorovich needs to get done, he has to rely on Achimovic in that area. Achimovic is guilty and Pandorovich isn't. The 1st Battalion, all their soldiers guarding people, helping in the transport, helping in the cleanup, working with the 10th Sabotage. They're responsible, Vinko Pandorovich isn't. Look at all the men and materials related to every one of those battalions, especially right after Vinko Pandorovich gets back. And you'll get a true picture of what went on and his responsibility. It's laid out very well in the brief. It's crucial for this tribunal that the responsibility in this situation of a commander be understood and set out. Your responsibility in this regard is immense. Generations will be looking to your words. I'm sure you'll get it right. Now, in any murder prosecution, even a prosecutor has a hard time believing many times that the defendant committed the murder. Mothers kill their children, fathers kill their wives, fathers kill their kids, husbands kill their wives. So it's sometimes hard to get grips on it, especially in mass murder. How can anybody do this? Do you have to be a demon or a devil? Well, the answer to that is no. And at this stage of the argument, I begin to run out of words, and I've tried to look to words of people that speak and write much better than I do. And in my readings, I came across a man that wrote something that I want you to hear, because it goes to this point. The man is named Leo Tolstoy. His words will be immortal. Not because he writes brilliantly, but that's one reason. But he clearly had his hand on the pulse of the human condition, of war, of peace. I wish I was going to go to Anna Karenina with you, but I'm not. Of course, I'm going to War and Peace. And in that story, there's a gentleman and an officer named Prince Andrew. And he's at the forward command post before a major battle with Napoleon. And his friend comes to the command post, his friend Pierre. And Pierre says to him, "So, you think we shall win tomorrow's battle?" "Yes, yes," answered Prince Andrew absently. "One thing I would do if I had the power," he began again. "I would not take prisoners." "Why take prisoners? It's chivalry. The French have destroyed my home and are on their way to destroy Moscow. They have outraged and they are outraging me every moment. They are my enemies. In my opinion, they are all criminals, and so thinks Timokhin and the whole army. They should be executed. Since they are my foes, they cannot be my friends, whatever may have been said at Tilsit." "Yes, yes," muttered Pierre, looking with shining eyes at Prince Andrew. "I quite agree with you." Goes on. "Not take prisoners," Prince Andrew continued. "That by itself would quite change the whole war and make it less cruel. As it is, we have played at war. That's what's vile. We play at magnanimity and all that stuff. Such magnanimity and sensibility are like the magnanimity and sensibility of a lady who faints when she sees a calf being killed. She is so kind-hearted that she can't look at blood, but enjoys eating the calf served up with sauce. They talk to us of the rules of war, of chivalry, of flags of truce, of mercy to the unfortunate, and so on. It's all rubbish. I saw chivalry and flags of truce in 1805. They humbugged us, and we humbugged them. They plunder other people's houses, issue false paper, and worst of all, they kill my children and my father, and then they talk of the rules of war and magnanimity to foes. Take no prisoners, but kill and be killed. He who has come to this, as I have, through the same sufferings. You don't have to be inhuman to feel like this in war. When you see your father killed, your family killed, and after 3 years of it, but it's a soldier's duty to deal with it. It's easy for me to stand up here and quote the Geneva Conventions. I understand that. I haven't been through what these guys have been through. But impunity, if we're going to stop it, this court has to be the first line. Now, the victims in this case are never far from our minds. I always end with the victims. I don't trust my words. I've been doing this. I have some words on my wall that I would like to take down But before I do, I want to give them over to you. And my thoughts are always with those rows on rows of headstones in Popović, and the eyes looking out at me from the video. And a soldier named John McCrae, many years ago, scratched down this poem in a place not far from here. And it's on my wall. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. That marks our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep. Though poppies grow, Flanders fields. This trial chamber is in the best position to give the men, the women of Srebrenica some rest, some peace, some measure of justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As agreed, we'll have a break now. Let me consult with my colleagues. For how long? The decision is we'll have a 15-minute break now. And then in the course of the question time, we'll have a further 15 minutes when we feel it is more appropriate. Okay? Thank you.
All rise for your overview.